All right, all right. Welcome, family, to the Kingdom of Israel. And we're going to talk about that slave Bible. We're going to look at the Negro Bible. And that's a book by Joseph Lumpkin. We're also going to go over an article within the Smithsonian Magazine, an article by Bridget Katz, where same topic, discussing the slave Bible. And I kind of see or I understand why the Smithsonian has come like under attack by the governmental administration. One for the way it explained how the slave Bible, was used. And more specifically, I guess when you look at this article that was written in their magazine by Bridget Katz. But tonight, I'm going to take you into the Negro Bible by Joseph Lumpkins. I'm going to read a little bit, just a little bit, from out of that book. Then I'm going to take you to the Smithsonian Magazine. We're going to read a little bit out of that. And we just want to look and see some of the history behind Christianity. Thank you all for coming, into the live. We want to look at a little bit of this history behind Christianity and come to understand, as I've said for years, how this belief system is something that men created. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the creator and or righteousness, right? These things are definitely true within the standard that they exist in. But let's examine religion and how man came about to use the concepts of religion to control and or oppress people. And more specifically, we'll really look at, how Christianity has been used as a mechanism of oppression throughout, time. These things are undeniable. So when we look at the slave Bible, when we look at the writings within Joseph Lumpkin's book, the Negro Bible, we're just going to listen to some other thoughts and opinions surrounding the Bible. Now, this is also where I'm also going to use some biblical verses to show how they're trying to use the concept of religion in a manner to control people. And these things are prophetic. It's like it's written and or expressed that these things would happen. So that's what we're really going to get into, today. So I thank you all for coming, into the live. I say you can share the live, you can repost, the live. As we get off into this to talk about the Negro Bible, right? Just trying to make sure I'm not missing anything else that I wanted to bring out about or with this subject. Yeah, I guess I might as well just go ahead and jump off into it. Yeah, might as well just jump off into it and just show how, they've taken the concept of religion to manipulate people, and they've used the Bible to do this. But I think I just have to be clear, though, you all, that it doesn't mean that something is wrong with the Bible or the writings in the Bible. What it means is the way someone has taken it and put their spin on it to have a degree of control is the thing I think we're really arguing about and or missing in the point when we talk about these writings of antiquity. Because the more I scrutinize the writings themselves, I don't have a problem with the writings. I have an issue with the way the religion is implemented within society, because it does not stand for what the actual writings stand for within the premise of righteousness. And I think we can see that with respect to how the world, things within the world are being played out, and there's so much unrighteousness happening right now in the world. But let's get off into it, as we're going to go right into the Negro Bible by Joseph Lumpkin. You all tap the screen. That part doesn't cost anything. All right, share the live and repost the live. All right, so I wanted to say this, as well. The Bible is not a European book, because that's something a lot of people have expressed. And it is very misleading to say white people wrote the Bible. It's misleading to say that. In big facts, the Bible speaks to the end of European rule, their downfall and elimination. And this is why they've decided like they needed to get their hands on it. All right, in their ignorance from ages, they assumed they could hijack the heritage. This is what they do. They will hijack your heritage. And in hijacking the heritage, what we see is how today they claim to be the Jews, right? They'll hijack the heritage. Even in that time when you talk about Herod, that king, it's understood and known that he was not an authentic Judean. He was an Idumean, or he was an Edomite. He was from the lineage of Esau. They broke into the heritage and they hijacked it, and they considered themselves to be that people. So in their ignorance from ages, they assumed they could hijack the heritage and steal the writings, which became the Bible. So we realize they have inherited lies. In their corrupt minds, they believe they could become the people, take control over the writings, create religions, and develop their own narrative to interpret the writings that would somehow change their outcome. Thank you all for coming into the live. They think because they've taken control of the writings that it can change their outcome. This is how corrupt they are, right? He said they have brought and paid off many kings, right? So I'm just telling you, they've bought and paid off many kings, nations, and people to keep their dirty secret. They don't want nobody to know the fraudulent activities that they've created, the various heritages that they've hijacked. So they pay people to not say anything. As is expressed within the writings, they have taken crafty counsel. I'm telling you. The biblical writings from the standpoint of the testimony and or the prophecy, these things are true. The issue is they've taken control of the writings and they've tried to throw you off the trail. And again, because they think this will change their outcome. So I just said they've brought and paid off many nations, many kings to keep their dirty secret. We look at Luke 4 and 6, and it tells us this. The devil said unto him, all this power will I give thee, and the glory of them. For that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will give it. If thou wilt worship me, he says, all shall be thine. So when we talk about a devil, we ain't talking about something in a red suit. These are men centered around deception. So when I say they've bought off kings and nations and people, these are the deceivers who say they'll give you glory or they'll give you fame. You can have wealth as long as you serve them. And this is what people have succumbed to. This is what nations have succumbed to. This is what kings have succumbed to. So most of you continue to believe their deception when talking about Christianity. And the reason being, it makes life easier. All right. The bare and painful truth is Christianity. Your religion was created by man. If that is your belief, your religion was created by man. White people, the God of this world, not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are the people that created Christianity. I know this is hard to understand. This is hard to hear. And we're going to get off into the Negro Bible. We're going to get off into the writing by Joseph Lumpkin. We're going to look at what Bridget Katz wrote within the Smithsonian magazine centered around the slave Bible, because I want you all to see how they intentionally come about to use these writings to manipulate people. More specifically, to manipulate the Negro, or to manipulate the true heritage of those that are of the tribe of Judah, because they moved in and hijacked the heritage of Judah and said, now, oh, we're the Jews. Okay. So I don't leave this door open for the so-called Jewish people to slide in and say, see, Christianity is not the way, and we're the Jews. We're the real people. Because I'm telling you, if you put them in a room, all you would see, they all white people. That's all you would see. Europeans. That's what we so call them today. That's all you'll see. Revelations 12:9, it says, the great dragon was cast out. That old serpent called the devil. And again, all we're talking about are men that are deceivers in the world today. And when we look at what's happening in the world today, it's open. Who's misleading the world? Who's using their power and their influence to corrupt the world? He said, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So this goes back to where I said they've bought and paid off kings, nations, and people to keep their secret. We see in Luke 4:6 where it's expressed, the deceiver, the one in control, will give them power, will give them fame, will allow them to be successful, have prosperity, as long as they serve them in their unrighteousness. So here we have 2 Corinthians 11 and 14, and we're going to get into the slave Bible. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Joseph Lumpkin's writing as it pertains to the Negro Bible. Just getting things warmed up, you all. 2 Corinthians 11 and 14. He says, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. So when we talk about these people, Europeans, white folks, Esau, Idumeans, they've transformed themselves into angels of light, meaning they've used their resources to make it appear that they're knowledgeable. And they have information out that the world is at this point functioning off of. They've even created a religion. And this is how they've transformed themselves into an angel of light, but their light, their information is corrupt. And we can see the proof of that in real time. It said, therefore, there is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness. And this is where we go into, they've bought and paid off kings, nations, and people to keep their secret. So it appears as if because they all have this well-organized structure and a way of doing things, it appears as if they're functioning in an upright manner. But it says, whose end shall be according to their works. Their works are not righteous. We all know this. We can look at the deception that is in the world. And also, Job 9:24, it tells us the world is in the hand of the wicked. Who is that? I know for a number of you, you don't want to deal with the hard truth that Europeans, what we call today white people, they rule the world. America is called the superpower. Who's in control of America? They have the European Union, right? They've created the United Nations. They've created NATO. This is the evil. This is the wicked upon whom the world is in their control. This is the deceiver. This is that Satan, man, devil, deceiver, who's transformed himself into an angel of light. And he's used his resources to create these ministers that go about and they want to act as if, what they're doing is righteousness. So you've heard me say with Jewish people, they're nothing more than white people. These are Europeans. That's what we call them today. It's like I said, if you put them in a room together, you won't be able to tell the difference. And then we go to Revelations 2:9, and we're going to get to the slave Bible. We're going to get to Joseph Lumpkin's writings as it pertains to the Negro Bible. We're coming up on it. Revelations 2:9. Thank you all for coming into the live. Share the live, repost the live. He says, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews. Let me tell you right now, man, they hate when you read this verse right here. In fact, they want you to be accosted, apprehended. They want people to believe that pointing this out is some form of hate. But it's not hate. It's just that truth is bitter. It's just that deception and the imagination that has run for ages and generations, it's coming down. And they're trying to do everything they can to stop it. And this is what I mean with respect to these writings. They've taken control of the writings. They've created their own narrative, thinking it will change their outcome. Let me finish reading it. He says, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not. It says, but are the synagogue of Satan, meaning they go around and they're deceiving people in the name of righteousness. Remember, it said that Satan transformed himself into an angel of light, and his ministers have also transformed themselves into ministers of righteousness. This is what we're witnessing. He says, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer, because they come after people who point this out. Now, if there was no truth to it, who would care? Why bother? But because they need to protect their lies, they use their power and their influence to go after people. But here he says, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison. This is what they're trying to move to in this day and time. That anyone that speaks to their lie, that they be cast into prison or some other fine or penalty. Something has to happen to them. But it's telling us, don't be afraid. Continue to speak the truth. Stand on the truth. He says, the devil shall cast some of you into prison. The devil, meaning the deceiver, is going to cast some of you into prison, that you may be tried. Tried meaning to see if you're going to waver. Because when you look at how they deal with these entertainers, that they get an inkling of understanding and they think then that they can use their platform to talk about these things. And the next thing you know, they're being told they need to be re-educated, and then they recant everything that they're saying or that they've said. He says, you're going to be tried. He says, and ye shall have tribulation. So it's for us to understand in dealing with these devils that they will use their wealth and their power, because they've spent billions, you all, to protect their web of lies. So when you stand for this truth and looking to expose them for being fraudulent, it's saying know that they're going to use all of their resources. And if you about this truth, you better know what it means to stand 10 toes down. Revelation 12:17. He said the dragon was wroth with the woman. Now we're going to look at this from the standpoint of a parable. And I've told you all before that we can't read these writings from the standpoint of a literal sense because it's written in code, right? It's not meant for us to deal with it so much from the standpoint of being literal. So, but here, the dragon was wroth with the woman. So he's talking about this deceiver in the world. They're mad. They're upset with anyone that will truly stand on righteousness and seek to expose them for being liars or deceivers or, for taking people's land, for, taking people's identities, right? He said, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is where we're at. Because they do not keep the commandments of God, but they want you to think they do. They do not deal with the testimony, meaning the prophecy of righteousness. Here, where it says of Jesus Christ. Again, we're talking about righteousness, the testimony of righteousness. Because when you look at a terminology within a Jesus Christ, we have to break that down to understand we're talking about someone that's anointed, dealing in righteousness, a prophecy that speaks to righteousness, a people that follow a command or a way of life in righteousness. That's not them. They don't function that way. And this is obvious, to us. So they go about to make war against the true seed and or the people of God to protect their web of lies. I know y'all know what I'm talking about. If y'all know what I'm talking about, just put a one. Put a one up in the chat. Let me know y'all following me here. So these are the people. They suppress righteousness. These are the people, they suppress righteousness. Under the guise of wholesomeness, they've created religions, even Christianity. But there's nothing righteous about these creations or their traditions. This is what we've seen historically. I'm not trying to, just pick and I'm not trying to look. If it wasn't so, I wouldn't even, if it was real, I'd have to give it its props. But it's not. They're functioning under the guise of something wholesome. And they've created these religions, and Christianity is one of the religions they've created. And when we get into the slave Bible, and when we see the writings from Joseph Lumpkins dealing with the Negro Bible, and we see what Bridget Katz, what she wrote within the Smithsonian Magazine, talking about the slave Bible, we'll come to understand that these things are historically known, but ignored. So 1 John 3:10, it tells us, in this the children of God are manifest, when we talk about righteousness, and the children of the devil. So there's a people out there that is the children of the devil, but nobody wants to be a child of the devil. But this is who these people are. And they use their wealth, they use their prestige and power to cover it up. He said, whosoever do not righteousness is not of God. And this is what I mean. They don't do righteousness. It should be obvious to you that they don't do righteousness. Look at the state of the world under their leadership. You've heard me say, everything is in decline. Poor air, poor food, medicine, global warming, climate change, nation against nation, you name it. With them being or acting as the stewards of the earth, there's nothing but calamity and or confusion going on right now. So these would be the children of the devil. It's obvious. These would be the ones who would be that Satan who have transformed themselves into angels of light because they have money, they have resources. And they've paid people off. They've paid nations off to speak to their knowledge, their way, their policies, their procedures. And they're trying to function under a guise as if this is wholesome. This is the way things should go. But if we're reading this book as it pertains to the commandments, we'll see they're way off track. They're doing their own thing. Whosoever will not do righteousness, these are not the children of God, but the children of the devil. So, Christianity is not Christ-like. That's folklore. But it does have a ring. It does sound appealing. We've heard that before. Christianity is the celebration of dominance and oppression of the Negro and the true family of God. Y'all, I'm not picking on Christianity. I'm just looking to expose the truth that we've for so long went about just ignoring because that's just what we've been fed within our society. That's the education that we've been given. But it's time for us to acknowledge the truth and how they've used these things to corrupt our mind. The writings in the Bible are not corrupt. The principles within the Bible are not corrupt. But the fact that they've taken these writings, they've misconstrued the writings, and they've created their own presumptions. This is the problem. So within Christianity, you all, it's the celebration of dominance and oppression over the Negro. And this is what we're going to find out when we look at the slave Bible, when we look at the Negro Bible, and when we read what's written about it. So I just said it's the celebration of dominance and oppression over the Negro. So talking about celebration, who remembers Mary Turner and the illustration of her lynching, the powerful graphics, and the public spectacle? This is what they did on Sundays, month in or month out. It was a celebration. For more than 100 years, this was a celebration, a common thing. It was understood to be a tradition of Christianity. So some of you will say, that don't matter. Looking at, oh, but this is now, that was then. No, it really does matter because they're still functioning within the same tradition and or celebrations. They're just way more covert about it right now. But look into, if you're not familiar, look into Mary Turner. Look into what happened to her, how they put her on the stake. A pregnant woman. It's horrible what they did. But this being the tradition of Christianity, we can't let it slide. And tomorrow I'll talk about the Christian nationalists tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We'll go into that. Because all of this is a part of the corruption and the lies, the children of the devil. All right, so now let's go. Let's get off into the Negro Bible. We're going to read Joseph Lumpkin's writings as it pertains to the Negro Bible. Thank you all for coming in to the live. Share the live. We post the live. You all tap the screen. That part doesn't cost anything. But now we're going to get off into the Negro Bible. And then we're going to go into an article within the Smithsonian magazine that was written by Bridget Katz. Okay. The Slave Bible was published in 1807. It was commissioned on behalf of the Society for Conversion of Negro Slaves in England. So this conversion for Negro slaves, this was something that they were in control of. This is why I said it's the celebration, looking at the dominance and the oppression over the Negro. Because the whole point is looking for the conversion of the Negro slaves. They want our participation. The Bible was used by monasteries and slave owners to teach slaves about the Christian faith and evangelize slaves. Woo! Do you understand what it just said? This was to teach them about the Christian faith. Are you really looking at what has the Christian faith changed? This is all I'm trying to say and point out. It was never something meant to be for the good of the people. It was only meant to be to their advantage. The Christian faith, right here. It wasn't God love everybody. That wasn't the Christian faith. How miraculous you think it is now, they don't play that game. Only black folks talk and don't speak those lies. They don't play that. The Christian nationalists don't play that game. The Christian faith is centered around them being in control, them having dominance. They created this religion for their benefit. I know this is difficult. And you all thinking, some of you, that I'm looking to go off into some heresy or something along those lines, but you're in the heresy dealing with Christianity. Not accepting the truth within what transpired. They wanted to evangelize slaves. That means they need you to submit. Totally. to their will. That's how they feel today. As the Christian nationalists, they feel if you're in the black church, you don't know nothing. You need to come to them. You need to be retaught. So the Bible was used to teach some slaves to read, but the goal foremost was to tend to the spiritual needs of slaves in a way the missionaries and slave owners saw fit. That's manipulation right there. They weren't trying to bring people close to God. They needed to understand how to control people. The names of the editors are never mentioned, talking about their creation of this slave Bible. The name of the editors were never mentioned. And this is where I'm telling you, they didn't write the Bible. It's not a white man's book. Because in the book, it speaks to their end. And as I said, for some reason, they feel as if they can control the writings that would change the outcome. But that's insane. Being the deceivers that they are, so they've taken it, and then they've created Christianity. And the other sad fact is, then they created white Jesus and promoted that all around the world. And now today people say it don't matter. This is freaking insane, because it should matter, because that's a part of the lie. Righteousness would not be in association with corruption and or lie. These two things can exist. This is why they are the children of the devil. And they've used their creation within Christianity for dominance, for control, to maintain oppression over the Negro. That's the whole point behind Christianity and the Negro Bible, or the slave Bible. Now today, they can remove the concept of the slave Bible because they have this strong narrative and or way that they teach it within the seminary schools and within their system of institutions. Now it's like they can allow you to have the book, but they know you're not going to read it to wholly understand it, because you're following their talking points. Anyway, here it says, the names of the editors were never mentioned, although their intentions were clear: to limit and control the Bible narrative. Okay. This is what's written. The missionaries had to minister to the slaves while attempting to appease the slave owners in British West Indies. The owners feared an uprising. And that's the thing, as to what I'm telling you. They didn't write the Bible, because when you read the Bible, it speaks to their downfall. And they knew, as we understood truly what was in there, it invigorated us to challenge them. And they were like, we need to put an end to that. How do we not let that happen? How do we make it as if this is about us? So they needed to control the narrative. The owners feared an uprising. Their usual paranoia was heightened because of the Haitian slaves had overcome their masters 3 years earlier in the only slave revolt in history in which the slaves successfully overthrew their European oppressors and formed a new nation. See, that's within the writings how it speaks to them being corrupt and how it speaks to us being the children of the Most High. They don't want these writings in our hand because then we'd be pushing for liberation. Okay? Slaves and free people of color, led by a former slave, the first black general of the French army, Toussaint, right? He said, along with the man who became his successor, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, defeated Napoleon forces overcoming their masters. Throughout history, the Bible has encouraged us to fight against our enslavement to sin, hell, death, and the grave. So this is where when we look at these writings, we come to understand they didn't write this stuff, you all. They're just trying to control it. So anyone that says this is a European book, you never read it, you don't understand it, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're just another individual looking for a talking point, one, because you don't want to deal with discipline yourself. Because in these writings, what it truly speaks to is the principle, how we should govern our mind, how we should govern our actions. I don't know why anybody would have an issue with that. So here it says, we were encouraged to fight against our enslavement, or it says, but it has also encouraged us to fight against our fellow man who might choose to take our freedom and use us for his own purpose. Just as Egypt enslaved the Jews and used them for labor to build their empire, so were the slaves of Africa used to build the empire of the British West Indies and the United States. Now, here's the one thing. The same slaves that were used in Egypt, these are the same slaves that are used within the British Empire and or America. During that time, there was the concept of Africa was not a thing. And you may have been in the room last week when I spoke about the origins of Africa and how the Europeans created that name, no different than they created the name America, no different than they created the name the Middle East. These are all new inventions and or creations that they've put together. But we weren't calling ourselves African. They used that to prevent from saying the Negroes are the Jews. These are the same, group of people within the kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Israel, the Israelites were being used in Egypt. But here in the West Indies and within America, because the kingdom split, we went after the Jews, the Negroes. So, just as Moses stood against the Egyptians and led the children of Israel out of bondage, so we are encouraged to stand up against the cruel bonds of slavery and fight for our freedom and the freedom of fellow man. This is why they came with Christianity, to take that fight out of the people, that they will not look to stand up against the powers that be. This is where Christianity has nothing to do with the heritage of the people. It has nothing to do with the God of Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. This is a clear invention of Europeans so that they can maintain control and power in the world. In their attempt to eliminate all verses that could plant the seed of rebellion in the mind of the slaves, about 90% of the Old Testament and 50% of the New Testament was deleted. See, they never have any intention on allowing us to be taught what true righteousness is, because they understand these writings are about us rising to the occasion of being the stewards over the earth in righteousness, and that means they would have to step down. So they're trying to stay ahead. They're trying to make certain they can do whatever they can to manipulate the situation. And as much as you all don't want to hear it, Christianity is a part of that manipulation. But don't get it twisted. Righteousness still is in position and or play. If you want to deal, you can have righteousness and not have Christianity, but you can't have Christianity and righteousness. If so, where is it? Why have it not produced and or presented itself in all this time? In all this time we've had Christianity, we've not had righteousness. They've suppressed true righteousness and they've given us Christianity. And they've tried to make us feel that this is the way. But if you understand in which way it's going, you would see it is the way to destruction. It is a way to imperfection. So in the standard Protestant Bible, there are 1,189 chapters, but the Bible given to the slaves contained only 232 chapters. Absent from the Bible were all of the Psalms, which express hope for God's delivery from oppression. This is where we are still today, needing that deliverance from the oppression. Christianity does not teach deliverance from oppression. It says in the entire book of Revelations. In the slave Bible, the book of Exodus excludes the story of the rescue of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, which is the story that gives the biblical book its title. But the Bible includes Exodus chapter 19 and 20, where God appeared on Mount Sinai and gives his law, the Ten Commandments. Now, I just wanted to point out, right here that it excludes the story of rescue from slavery, which gives the book its title. They exclude, that part because they don't want for us to look at what it would mean to be independent. The whole point of this is to keep us as being slaves. And this is why they teach, God loves everybody. As long as they're in rulership. He loves everybody as long as they can control it. But don't let you step up and feel like you're going to be in a position of leadership. Oh, no. The Negro Bible, the slave Bible. So it was from this confusing and contradictory approach that the slave Bible was born. The book before you is the result of the work of the British clergies and Christian slave owners in the British West Indies and America, talking about the slave Bible, talking about the concept within Christianity to have dominance, and oppression over the Negro. That's the whole point behind this thing within Christianity. Dominance and control over a particular people. Because that particular people is destined to rule, and or they are the true stewards to rule in righteousness. So them being the devils and or the deceivers that they are, they've taken control over the writings. And as I've said, they use their influence and their power to put out a narrative. There was no John 3:16 in the slave Bible. That was not a part of the Christian faith. But all of a sudden, these things have changed. Because it gives them the degree of control that they need. Yeah, let them think God love everybody, so that way they won't come up against us. Servants, obey your masters. And man, they took that so way out of context, because that verse was talking about when you have righteous individuals in place and or position, follow their lead. So it says, it is the tool, talking about Christianity, their narrative, and the slave Bible. It is the tool and the result of their attempts to introduce Christianity into the slave community in a fashion that keep the message of salvation while muting the message of freedom. Now, here's what's interesting. Salvation and freedom are the same thing. So how they were pushing the message of salvation, again, this is where they twisted the understanding of what salvation is. It's like today within Christianity, if you were to ask people what salvation is, they don't have a clue. But salvation is the deliverance from oppression. Deliverance from oppression would be freedom. But they don't talk about salvation from the standpoint of deliverance from oppression. They just make you feel like salvation is going to be, some kumbaya moment in heaven. We all going to be hugging and kissing and holding hands. It's perverted. But you don't have a clear understanding as to what salvation is. It has become a word, a broad term. But salvation is the deliverance from oppression. It's in line with liberation and or freedom. So here, they were looking to introduce Christianity, and they gave a perverted meaning behind salvation. And the whole time, they wanted to suppress any message that led to freedom. It said this book is the Bible given to and read by the African slaves in the British West Indies. All right, 1 second here. What are they doing? Okay, in the British West Indies and the United States. So they wanted to make certain, and again, African slaves, that's new terminology. Because during that time, based on the region, they knew they were dealing with the Negroes of the tribe of Judah. But they use these nomenclatures and they come up with these names so that they do not have to deal with the true heritage of who the people are. Africa, African, y'all, that's new. In fact, as we've said, Africa is a continent. You must understand which country you're from. It has over 50 some odd countries in it, right? Who can truly be African. But, some folks try to make it make sense, but it can never make sense. So the Negro Bible, also called the Slave Bible, no chapter or verse was safe. No story was sacred enough to ward off removal of misinterpretation. This is how you know you're dealing with the devil. They were switching and changing things then. Does that mean righteousness and or the writings are incorrect? No. It just means they thought they could manipulate the minds of the people by using their power and their prestige to promote a narrative to deal with a psychological aspect of manipulating people. And they've done a very good job. They're very proficient at what they do, but this is the devil the Bible talks about. This is the deception over the entire world that we read about. Thank you all for coming into the live. Right? So it says, so I'm pointing out even the newly renowned John 3:16, it was not accepted, nor mentioned in the slave Bible. But now all of a sudden, you got Negroes and Black people, African American, whatever you want to call yourself, fighting for John 3:16. God love everybody because they now have you protecting them. Oh, it's clever. It's real clever. And you feel as if you're doing it in the name of Jesus, in the love of God. This is all a part of their psychological manipulation. This is all a part of how they use Christianity, right? They use it to brainwash and or manipulate the minds of people. It's just that simple. So this was a time in the British and American history that Christianity itself was used for purpose so opposite to the message of Jesus that it called for extreme declarations by those who would stand for the human right to be free. Now, they're writing this then, looking to point out the manipulation and to say the message within Christianity is different than the message of Jesus. But you would think, I'm just hating. But this is something that's more like an open secret. But they just know most of you, Negroes, Black folks, whatever you want to call yourself, aren't going to believe it. Because you've been well indoctrinated. You're influenced by their prestige. You've been trained within their institutions. And you just can't believe somebody could be so evil. So Christianity itself was used for purposes so opposite. That part. To the message of Jesus. So the message of Jesus was about liberation. It was about salvation, overcoming oppression. Why are we still oppressed? We're still oppressed because we have refused to go in accordance to what's written to live by the laws. We're following the European, his leadership, his policies, his procedures, his religion. So we suffer. We're oppressed. And the writings expressed that this would be our outcome until we recognize the need to change our mindset and live according to principle. In an 1846 speech, so we're still reading the Negro Bible by John Lumpkin, and then we're going to get to the article within the Smithsonian Magazine written by, what's her name again? Katz, Bridget Katz. Okay. So in an 1846 speech to the British and Foreign Anti-Slavery Society, Frederick Douglass summed up that the twisted bond between slavery and religion in the U.S. He began with a short summary of atrocities that were legal. And this is all I'm telling you. Christianity was a thing put in position and or place to maintain their dominance and their control. They created this religion. It has nothing to do with the heritage of the people. It has nothing to do with what's written in the book, but because they've created or because they've used their resources, their institutions, and they've put you in a classroom or they've repeated this thing so well and had people to rehearse it, you think it's true. You think it's real. So here, a short summary of the atrocities that were legal, even encouraged against enslaved people in Virginia and Maryland, including hanging, beheading, drawing and quartering, he said rape, and this is not the worst. He then made his case. And then quote, no, a darker feature is yet to be presented than the mere existence of these facts. I have to inform you that the religion of the southern states at this time is a greater supporter, the great sanctioner of the bloody atrocities to which I have referred, talking about Christianity. And a number of you want to ignore this history. You all, it's a trick. It's a trick. And those who know should talk about it. He said, while America is printing tracts and Bibles, sending missionaries abroad to convert the heathen, expending her money in various ways for the promotion of the gospel in foreign lands, the slave not only lies forgotten, uncared for, but is trampled underfoot by the very churches of the land. Why do we ignore that these things ever happen? Why do we try to act as if something good can come out of their creation within Christianity? Why? Because they've made you feel that, you can just say you believe and then everything is just magically going to be all right. You're a part of the hypnosis. You're under the spell. You want to get along with the oppressor. It doesn't make sense. You go against the message that even Jesus, who you say you believe in, you go against his message, which was salvation. Well, in order to have salvation, you have to identify who the enemy is within unrighteousness, that you can be free from that oppression. the way you all talk about it and or teach it as if, it's just magically going to change and everybody's just going to be on a same level. It doesn't make sense, but it feels good to you because you don't have to think about what the oppressor has done and or what's going to happen to him. So it says, continuing with the quote, he said, the use of religion to terrorize and control rather than liberate was something Douglas understood well. Ain't nothing changed, you all. They're still using it. It's a different type of terror, but you definitely don't get liberation from it. He said, understood well, having for decades keenly observed slave owners finding what they needed in the text and ignoring or suppressing the rest. This is still happening to this day. They ignore what's actually written in the Bible and they continue to push their Christian narrative. And I'm going to tell you something about the terminology Christian, although it's in the Bible. God's people never called themselves Christian. These were the people on the outside who were making fun of God's people. That's them Christians over there. That was a nickname they created. It was never a good thing. It was like calling somebody a name. In 1807, the Society for the Conversion of Negro Slaves went so far as to literally excise the central narrative of the Old Testament, creating an entirely different book for the use of missionaries to West Indies. All about manipulation. That's the whole point historically. That's the whole point of Christianity. When did it change to not be about manipulation? None of you can answer that question because it has not. But you're under the feel-good religion. And you've been trained to go in and Sunday out as if you're doing some service. All you're participating in are great degrees of superstition. Vain acts. He said, gone were references to exodus of enslaved Israelites from Egypt, references that were integral to self-understanding of millions of diaspora Africans. It says, above quotes are from the Smithsonian Magazine, and that's what we're going to read next. The Smithsonian Magazine, Smithsonian.com, January 4th, 2019. Calls for freedom or even humane treatment of slaves were met with equal and opposite voices. This is Christianity we're talking about. It's still happening to this very day. When you talk about the fictitious white Jesus that they've created and posted all around the world, I mean, you look at Brazil, they got a statue. When you go into the churches, you get stained glass. I mean, there's a European man. It's a lie. But folks say it don't matter. You all, if it did not matter, why did they create it? Why do you want to overlook the fact of what the oppressor has done? Why do you want to not look at the atrocities that they've created and don't make them fix it? If it don't matter, make them take it all down. You got to walk past it and act like you don't see it and say it don't matter. That's insane. Slavery was practiced extremely in the Middle East. We're going to talk about this part too. Slavery was practiced extensively. Slavery was practiced extensively in the Middle East because not only did we have to deal with being enslaved by the Europeans, and as I've said, we are the most hated people in the world, talking about the Negro, as they've called us, because they know we're the stewards. We're the ones that are positioned to rule the world in righteousness, but right now it's hard to see. But even the Ishmaelites, they're responsible. They put us into slavery as well. And we converted to Islam. And we converted to Christianity. All this conversion that we're doing. Not focusing on who we are and what our heritage is. We shouldn't be a part of no one's religion. We have our own way of life and called to duty by the Creator, our God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Although the Ishmaelites, right, they have their book and their writings, that's not for us. The funny thing is, they're supposed to adhere to what's written within our writings, but they reject and they rebel. But in the prophecy, they're going to be dealt with, but they will have, there will be room for them. But when it comes to the European, you all, in the prophecy, it's real bad what happens to them. And this is what they don't want people talking about. How it speaks to their end. No forgiveness. There will be forgiveness for what Ishmael did. There'll be forgiveness for what the other nations and people have done. But for the European, this Esau, this Idumean, there's no forgiveness. But in Christianity, they want you to think there is forgiveness. And this is why they push it. They're trying to change their outcome. So here, two rough estimates by scholars estimate the number of slaves held over 12 countries in the Muslim world between 11.5 million and 14 million. While other estimates indicate a number may have been between 12 and 15 million. 12 and 15 million slaves prior to the 20th century. And it's sad because some folks are trying to act like this thing within slavery never happened. It's unfortunate, but slavery continues today. Slavery claimed the sanction of Islam. Let me see. Slavery claiming the sanction of Islam is documented and presented in predominantly Islamic countries of the Sahel and an area in Africa between Sahara to the north and Sudanian Savannah to the south. Slavery is also practiced in territories controlled by Islamist rebel groups, as well as in Libya and Mauritania, despite being outlawed. This is happening to this very day, you all. And you must remember, based on the diaspora, We're all over the world, so we're still being enslaved. But the Muslim world, they don't talk about, that. They look to try and justify what they do. But according to the prophecy, that too will come to an end and they will be dealt with for what they're doing. But, there is a degree, once they receive their judgment, there is a degree of forgiveness for them. But for the European, there's no forgiveness. I'm not saying, look, just like with Ishmael, it says there's forgiveness for him, so I can talk about it. But unfortunately, there's no forgiveness for the European. That makes a lot of people mad. That makes a lot of people mad as we go through this world, and a number of you are trying to have sympathy for the oppressor. Well, if God says there's no forgiveness for them and that's what's written, what can I say about it? What can I do about it? I'm only here to bring out the message. Like it or love it, accept it or reject it. All right, let's go to the Smithsonian Magazine. So what we just read came from the Negro Bible, and that was by Joseph Lumpkin. All right, how y'all doing out there? All right, if y'all following along, if you like what you're getting, go ahead one more time, put a 1 in the chat. Let me know y'all in the room, y'all rocking with me. All right. Now we're getting ready to go into an article by Bridget Katz. This was January 4th, 2019. All right, appreciate you all. All right, thank you for coming into the live. Share the live, repost the live. You all, tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, I'll be back and I'll be talking about the Christian nationalists. And we'll be going over biblical, precepts and just explaining even more how the writings in the Bible are real, but none of what they're doing, none of what we're witnessing, none of it leads to righteousness. Okay. All right. So within the magazine for the Smithsonian, Bridget Katz, we're looking at heavily abridged slave Bible, removal passages that might encourage uprisings. So that's the whole point within Christianity. They don't want their judgment to come into play. Jesus expressed within the writings, talking about the anointed one, talking about righteousness. It said, for all that they've done in taking us into captivity, it says that they would have to go into captivity. Oh, Lord, don't talk about that in no Christianity, talking about no Europeans going into captivity. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about exposing these Jewish people today for being European, someone that hijacked the heritage long time ago. Even under Herod the king, it's there. It's there for you to see and understand. This ain't nothing new. This has gone on for ages and generations. They don't want you to know they are the people that God hates. Jacob I've loved, Esau I've hated. They're trying to hide. They want to be anybody but who the Bible calls them to be. So they're Christians, they're Jews, they're anything but Esau, Amalek. They don't want to be the Idumean, but that's who they are. So here, looking at her article, it says, When 19th century British missionaries arrived in the Caribbean to convert enslaved Africans, and again, that word African, that's a word they created. It's a newly engineered word like America. These are words they created, like the Middle East. It helps them to prevent from identifying the true nationality of who they're talking about. But they were looking to convert the Negro, the one from the tribe of Judah, to be submissive to their way of doing, so that he would build their kingdom, their empire, no different than that within Egypt was built, and so many other nations that we've built, and or things or places where we've been enslaved. He said they came armed with a heavy edited version of the Bible. Any passage that might incite rebellion was removed, gone. For instance, references to Exodus of enslaved Israelites from Egypt. He said today, just 3 copies of the so-called slave Bible are known to exist. 2 are held in the United Kingdom, and 1 is currently on view at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. All right, Michael Martin reports for NPR. All right, so the Bible is the centerpiece of the exhibition, titled Parts of the Holy Bible, selected for the use of the Negro slave. Specifically, you all, do you catch it? Specifically, Christianity is for the Negro slave. They need us to be submissive to their religion so that we don't stand up and take our rightful place as the stewards over this world and put things back on track. So again, they've captured these writings. They created a narrative in hopes of changing their outcome. It's not going to work, but you just need to understand this is the premise and or intent used for Christianity. They're just trying to buy some time. And they're going to take as many of you fools with you, that will go. All right, it was selected for the use of Negro slaves in the British West Indies Islands, which explores how religion was used to bolster the economic interest in the British Empire. Once again, Christianity is used to get them riches, to get them control. They boast how religion, what religion? Christianity. It's a trick. It's a trick. It happened then. It's happening now. Ain't nothing changed, you all, just the faces of the people. The same intention is there. The abridged work was first printed in London in 1807 on behalf of the Society for the Conversion of Negro Slaves. Again, the focus on Negro slave, Judah. The missionaries associated with this movement sought to teach enslaved Africans to read. This is what I read earlier. That was the quote. All right. So it says to teach enslaved Africans to read, the ultimate goal of introducing them to Christianity. You all, we had a heritage before they created Christianity. We were told to follow the commandments. And if we did that, we would be put at the head. That's our heritage. They took our heritage and they gave us their religion, Christianity. Same book, same writings. They just used the point of us being enslaved and destroyed mentally within the mind to then turn around after ages and generations to try and give it back to us under another narrative. So I understand why a number of you are offended in trying to say, you know, white man this and did that, but this is not their writings. This is not their book. So it says, where was I? It says, introducing them to Christianity. But they had to be careful not to run afoul of farmers who were worried about the revolutionary implications of educating their enslaved workforce. The British West Indies islands, modern day Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, formed the heart of England's overseas empire. They used Christianity to build the empire. It ain't changed. They're still using it and or doing it to this very day. I know a number of you are mad about this because they've convinced you that it's real. But I'm telling you, righteousness is real. As the book say, we don't wrestle with flesh and blood, you all. We wrestle with the principles that are in the book. So the righteousness is real. It's the Christianity that's fake, the thing that they created and or they have this narrative that they're feeding, you know, us about Jesus Christ. And then they made him blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And then you turn around and fight for them and say, it don't make no difference. It does make a difference if we're talking about truth. So that became the heart of England's overseas empire. It says, after all, and it was powered by millions of enslaved Africans forced to work on sugar plantations. And here's a quote. It said, this can be seen as an attempt to appease the planter class, saying, look, we're coming here. We want to help uplift materially these Africans here, but we're not going to be teaching them anything that could incite rebellion. So that was Anthony Schmidt, the Museum of the Bible's associate curator of Bible and religion. This is what he was telling Martin. So here it says, that meant the missionaries needed to radically pare down version of the Bible. A typical Protestant, okay, we read this earlier, you know, also. A typical Protestant edition contained 66 books. Okay, we read that. So it said, by comparison, the astoundingly reduced slave Bible contained only parts of 14 books. It said, gone were Jeremiah 22 and 13. Woe to him that build his house by unrighteousness, and his chambers by wrong, that use his neighbor's service without wage and give him not for his work. So here again, it's just showing how Europeans created Christianity and pushed Christianity because they knew this would be a vehicle to bring them wealth, to build their empire. I'm only explaining the history around Christianity and what they've done to manipulate the minds of the people. And some of you, you're upset with me as if, I'm intentionally doing it. No, I'm just trying to, bring out this truth so that we can, for once in our life, within our generations, be able to stand for what's right. So also, gone was Exodus 21:16, where it says, and he that's still a man, and sell him, or if he be found in his hand, he should surely be put to death. Gone. Right? In their place, the missionary emphasized passages that encouraged subservience. They focused on emphasis, Ephesians 6:5. Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling in singleness of your heart as unto Christ. And this is what I'm telling you, they took this way out of context. This is not telling you to be no slave to no one. That verse is telling you when you're dealing with the men of righteousness and they're dealing within the commandments, that you should follow, that you should listen to their instruction. When they're giving you an order centered around correction, it's something you need to adhere to. Servants to righteousness. Masters being those that were your leaders. They twisted, or they just took that way out of context. And have some of you going around repeating, they wrote it. No, they didn't write it. They just captured the book. And then they went about to create their own narrative. Because in this book, as I'm reading it, still understanding it, this book speaks to their end. It tells you how they're going to come to their end. It also tells you how we're going to rise to power again. And that's the whole point of Christianity, to prevent the conversation as to how we rise to power. All of the emphasis within Christianity is about suppressing the Negro. Make sure he stay oppressed. Make sure he stay a slave. Don't let him understand salvation and or start looking for liberation. All right. So they talk about it being on display. So here, and we're coming to, the end, for this right here. Thank you all for coming into the live, my brother Abu. It says, through tools like the slave Bible. Though tools like the slave Bible may have been used to repress rebellion, it did not stop enslaved people in the Caribbean from fighting for their freedom. And all we're trying to point out is the principles in the Bible, you all. These are real principles if you're going to apply them to your life. But Christianity is a tool that they created. They used. This is what has been expressed. I'm just explaining and emphasizing what they've written about and what they've talked about as it pertains to the Bible, how they've captured the book and then created a different narrative from which most of you don't read it, don't understand it, and then they sent you to their institutions to get an understanding of it. And the point and or intent is to manipulate your mind so that you will stay subservient to keeping them in power. I'm only explaining what we just read and or It has been talked about historically why they created Christianity. Christianity is not of God, it's of men. Men that want to manipulate the world. So they use their power and their prestige. They pay for you to go into their institutions and they give you the narrative. You come back out. You're just repeating these things. You haven't done no real research. You've just been indoctrinated. And because they have these institutions and they give you these certificates, you just assume that it's truth. So here, look at this. It says, tools like the slave Bible may have been used to repress rebellion. It did not stop enslaved people in the Caribbean from fighting for their freedom. Enslaved people constantly rebelled against slavery. According to the UK National Archive, right up until emancipation in 1834. Here's my side note. President Abraham Lincoln issued Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. So, first of all, it first happened in the UK in 1834. Then they brought it, talking about emancipation, then they brought it into the US in 1863 during the American Civil War. Now, this is where I say peep game. It declared that slaves living in areas in rebellion against the United States were legally free. The tactic of introducing emancipation was something to stop the fighting. Like, let's make them think that they're free. They used it in England in 1834 to stop the rebellion because they know, they understand if these Negroes catch a foot, they will overcome us and be in rule. So let's act like we're giving them something. They used emancipation as a tool in 1834 in London. These same Europeans, these same people, they then brought the tactic to America in 63 in areas where rebellion was taking place. And then this is what they did throughout time. Even in 1965 or 64, when the rebellion broke out then, that's when they said, oh, let's give them civil rights. We got to make it feel like we're giving them something. Ooh, we need to stop them from fighting because we can't control it when it happens to that point. And we don't want it to get out of control. So let's act like we're giving them something. This is what they've done historically. Right? Let's see. Let me just finish reading that part. So I said, peep game. It declared that slaves living in the areas in rebellion against the United States were legally free. However, it did not end slavery everywhere or immediately free every enslaved person. That's what I mean by it was just a game. They put something out there to stop the fighting so that they could gain control once again. All right. So I appreciate you all for coming in to listen as we talk about the slave Bible and Christianity and how Christianity has been a tool to manipulate the minds of people, but righteousness does stand. There's nothing wrong with the Bible. There's nothing wrong with the writings in the Bible. What's wrong is how the Europeans have taken the writings and they've created their own narrative, how they created the religion, and you cannot deny that they created this religion. You just can't deny it. You can want to ignore it and or lie to yourself about it, but you can't deny they didn't create it. So I'll be back tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. And if you missed anything, and if you feel like you want to go back and try to look at what we talked about and the different verses that we tied into this to show you they are the devil, the man, the deceiver that biblical writings talk about. They are the evil in the world in this time and or place that has to fall. And they're using a guise of righteousness within Christianity to make you feel as if they're trying to do right by you. But all the time, they're manipulating you. And then they go so far as to write books about how they use it to manipulate people. Oh, they're not talking about it right now in this day and time, but they talked about it in the early 1900s, in the mid 1900s. They wrote about it and talked about it openly then. So it still stands today. And this is why we're going to get into the Christian nationalists. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. And we're going to use biblical verses to show they're a fraud. All of this stuff they're doing is fraud. They're the devil the Bible speaks of that have deceived the entire world. And they've used religion to do it. That's their tool. They think because they control the narrative that that's going to change their outcome. It's not. But we need to be aware that we can separate ourselves mentally. So again, there's a link at the top of my page. I didn't know at one point in time. I went and looked and the link wasn't there. I don't know what happened, why they took it down, maybe. I don't know. But I had to put it back because I was telling you all last week to go and click the link and you can get to the YouTube channel. And I went and checked it there and it wasn't there. So I had to put it back. But the link is there. You go on my page right under where it says Saturday, 11 o'clock. You click that link. You can subscribe to the channel. There's a playlist I have there. There's a series that I've done called Prophecy 2026. Y'all check out that prophecy. that playlist. Look at the things that we're talking about to educate and bring understanding to these writings that we can change our mind. We can uplift ourselves. We can get away from the false teachings of Christianity and those things that they're doing to keep us oppressed. That's the name of the game for them. And Christianity is to maintain oppression. All right. So that's it for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow, 11 o'clock. Y'all go to the YouTube channel, pick up the playlist, go through it, make notes, look at the different topics. You all may love the life after death, conversation. You may look at the American Negro problem. Go look at that one. That was a real good one. Illustrating, what was his name? John Pepper, his writings from the 1920s and how in the Congress, they were talking again. Their whole game is to keep the Negro oppressed. That at the end, whatever they got to do to keep us confused, that's what they spend their resources on. And it's just time for us to stop being, the fool. Stop allowing ourselves, to fall just for, the money. And come to understand we gain more if we start to live a principled life. As it said, we're not wrestling with flesh and blood. We're wrestling with the principles. All right. So I'm going to leave it at that. All right. Appreciate you. Peace, shalom. You all be safe. Come back tomorrow. Most High willing. Come back tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock, and we're going to talk about the Christian nationalists. Thank you all. I'm going to put this video up on the YouTube channel. Let me see that you all subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right? Have a good night.